Are you looking for details of the most beautiful weekend hikes in southeast Queensland and further afield? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Everyday Hiker podcast. My name is Beck and I'm your host. Join me and my guest hikers as we share amazing locations, practical tips and guides for new hikers, as well as those with more experience looking for some inspiration. And please, if you like what you hear, follow me, share with your friends, rate my podcast, and send me your feedback. Hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk about the Three Capes track, which is in Tasmania. So it's not southeast Queensland, but I know there's a lot of interest in travelling to Tasmania because there's just so many amazing hikes to do down there. And this is probably one of the most accessible. It's a great introduction to multi-day hiking and just a beautiful, beautiful track to walk. So given how much interest there is, I thought I would talk through my experience and give you some practical tips to get you started if you're interested in the Three Capes track. What makes this walk so special is just sensational coastal views, the wildlife along the way. I mean, who doesn't love seeing a wombat? But also the history, given where it's located. And as I said, it's accessible. People can manage this one. It's 48 kilometres of what would be considered moderate and very well graded track. And the thing that makes it a pleasure as a start on multi-day hiking is that accommodation is in huts rather than camping. So firstly, the Three Capes track is accessed by boat from the Port Arthur Historic Site, which is about 90 minutes drive southeast of Hobart. You can also get into the Three Capes area from what would traditionally be considered the end of the walk, which is Fortescue Bay, and that does allow you to do camping, bush camping, or even a day trip from Fortescue Bay out to one of the capes. But really, the best part of it is to do the full track experience, start to finish, and that's how it was intended and how it unfolds as you walk along. And you have two options when deciding to do Three Capes. The first is to do it through Tasmania Parks and Wildlife Service, which is the one that I did. Or if you're looking for one where everything's organised for you, including food and upgraded accommodation, you might choose to go with a private operator such as the Tasmanian Walking Company. Now, either way you go, they're pretty much walking the same track. It just really comes down to the quality of the experience in terms of whether you want to be self-guided and a bit more rough and ready, or whether you want that sort of luxury experience. As I said, I did the Tasmania Parks and Wildlife one, which is a 4-day and 3-night experience. The standard cost is, I think, very affordable at $625. This includes the boat and accommodation. The coach service from Hobart to Port Arthur is extra, and I'll talk about that in a minute. There are also discounts for concessions and also for off-season periods. Like at the moment, you can book for winter, and I think you knock about 100 or maybe a little bit more off the price to do it in winter. If you want to go in that peak holiday period, which is generally the Christmas, New Year, school holiday, you will need to book well in advance, which is why I'm doing this episode now, because we're in May and the booking for that period for 2026-27 will be opening by the end of winter. You book via the Parks and Wildlife Service website, and I've put a link in the notes for you to go straight to that. And like I said, dates are released in booking windows, so you're looking out in the next couple of months for summer becoming available. At the moment, you can only book winter. Spots fill up really quickly, as you can imagine. There are only 48 spots per day. And if your preferred date isn't available on your first check, it is worth going back and have a look because people do cancel and change dates. But you should check the terms and conditions if you book another date and make sure that you're able to do this if you want to change. So on a couple of logistics. Firstly, as I said, you need to get to Port Arthur. And there's an option to book one of 2 coach services from downtown Hobart or the airport. But they are limited in that they generally go early in the morning. So you need a flight that matches the coach pickup time, or you need to stay overnight in Hobart the night before your trip. I would recommend doing this as it gives you a chance to buy food items. So with quarantine, you're not going to be able to take some of the fresh food items that you might have wanted to, particularly if you're coming from Brisbane, and it's going to be really tough to get a first thing in the morning flight down as well. There is also a public bus that goes to Port Arthur in the afternoon from Hobart, and that's a great option as well. It doesn't take that much longer, and you get to you're taking exactly the same route as the private coach. But what it would mean is that you need to stay overnight in Port Arthur, because the two boats starting out with the trip leave sort of lunchtime-ish and then sort of mid-afternoon. I'd recommend, if you want to explore more of the Tasman Peninsula and or do a ghost trip at Port Arthur, this is really something worth considering. I put a link to the motel where I stayed at, which I thought was fabulous, right next to the Port Arthur site, if this is something that interests you. You can also drive to Port Arthur yourself, and long-term parking is available to leave your car or van there while you're out on the track. Now, your ticket from Tasmania Parks and Wildlife includes entry into the Port Arthur site. So that's one of the ideas with getting the bus early from Hobart. You can you can leave your pack, including both the pack that you're taking on the track and any other excess luggage that you might want to store while you're away, in the office in the Port Arthur site, and it allows you to go and visit the site. And there's just a fantastic array of walking tours and other events at Port Arthur to choose. So make sure you have a look at their website, which I've put in the links, and try and plan your morning around it. I think you'll quickly see that you could spend much more than a morning at Port Arthur, and that's where you might think about, do I do an overnight either at the start of the trip or the end of the trip? A word of caution though, you do need to book your coach and boat service well in advance if you want to guarantee the times that you want. So why might you want to take the earlier boat? Just because if you're worried about that first day walk-in, not having any time pressure on you, it will cut off your time at Port Arthur though. So that's what you've got to think about. Do I want more time at Port Arthur? Happy to take the later boat, or the earlier boat because I've already been at Port Arthur a while and I want to spend more time on the track. And then you have to line up your coach service if that's how you're getting to Port Arthur with that. The boat trip over to start the track leaves from the dock within the Port Arthur site. It's run by Pennicott Wilderness Journeys, and they take you on a bit of a tour around the inlet before you cross over to the other side to start your walk. And this is a beautiful area, the inlet area, dramatic coastal cliffs. It is heading straight out to the ocean. You won't go that far, but depending on the day, you might see, apart from the fantastic scenery, seals and dolphins frolicking around the water. So you'll get a bit of a boat trip, up to about an hour before you head over to the other side. When you get over to Denman's Cove, this is where you're dropped off to start the track. Now, the guidebooks will tell you that your feet will get wet as you are getting off the boat into water and sort of wading in a fairly shallow water to get to the beach before you start the track. Now, I had a day with really choppy seas, and I wouldn't have called it just a shallow entry into the water. We were about thigh deep. So you have to be prepared to get wet. So that might affect what you wear. Definitely some trousers or shorts so you can roll them right up. Obviously, you've got to take your boots off, work out how to carry them if they don't fit into your pack. So you need to get prepared, put them around your neck with the shoelaces tied, whatever you decide to do. And obviously you want your backpack either on your back or in a way that you can carry it overhead as you wade into the shore. And then when you get there, you're going to want a small towel just to dry off your feet before you put your shoes and socks on. And look, you really don't have to hurry away from Denman's Cove. It is a less than 2-hour walk, only about 4 kilometres to the first cabin, which is your stop for the night. There is a bit of uphill, but nothing too taxing. So you can go at your own pace. In the summer, if it's a nice day, people actually swim at Denman's Cove before heading out on the first walk. When you get to the lodge, you'll likely be greeted by the ranger who resides there, and a list of rooms and their occupants will be posted on the notice board at the central cabin. And you'll stay in these groups, so you will find out who you're bunking down with for the next few nights and stay in it for those whole 3 nights. Let's talk about the rooms themselves. I found the beds really comfortable. They were memory foam mattresses with a vinyl cover on wooden bunks, up to 8 people in a room. You may get one that has got a smaller number of beds, 2 or 4. You may not have a full room. But you've got to be prepared that you might be in a bunk room with up to 8 people. The bunk beds themselves do allow for some privacy in that you can drape a towel or something like a sarong over the side or the back of the bunk, if that's important to you when you're sleeping, or if, getting changed, whatever it may be. The cabins aren't heated, but the fact that you're in a room with other people, you have a reasonably thick mattress for some insulation, and the louver windows can be sealed shut, provides some sort of protection against the cold. The main challenges are noise. Yep, you're going to get some snorers. And also just that proximity to other people that you literally have just met, particularly if you're in one of those 8-bed bunk rooms. There is plenty of room in the cabins to store bags and hang things up. There's the shelves and hooks all over one wall. There's also a balcony outside, which people sort of leave their boots and their socks out to dry overnight, but it's undercover. So, you're not shoved in there with no room to spread your gear out. There is only one location, or one of the 3 cabins, that has a shower. There's limited washing facilities, but there are sinks around, including in the kitchen. There are at least a couple of toilets at every location, and obviously sinks for things like brushing teeth, freshening up in the morning. It's basic accommodation, but it is comfortable. And there is a fantastic central hut at each of the 3 locations, and this provides not only for cooking, quite big sort of commercial grade type kitchens, but also long tables for eating and relaxing. And at each location you might find deck chairs, yoga mats, board games, or just books, mostly wildlife books to read. There's also plenty of USB-A, I will say A, not C unless they've upgraded, charging points for phones and other devices like your camera, but no real electrical power points. It's all about bringing a USB charging cable. Outside the cabins, there's also huge decks to relax on, and some of them have sensational views. I found the cooking facilities really great. You can easily boil water for drinking and cooking. In fact, there were plenty of utensils, dishes, places to wash up, places to prepare your food. The packing list will tell you to bring your own everything for cooking. But if you were sort of in a pinch, there is most items in the kitchens. If you were just bringing generally packaging to do your food prep and eating from. The communal areas are also heated, some with an open fire. So if it is a bit cool, and in Tasmania that could just as easily be the middle of summer, it's the best place to sort of hang out in the afternoons when you finished your walk, for dinner and socialisation after dinner, because your cabins aren't really designed for that. Each night you'll also get a talk from the ranger on what to expect for the next day, and they'll answer any questions you have. If you're lucky, and I think you're lucky most of the time, you can spot some of the local wildlife around the cabins, particularly at night. And this can include echidnas, wombats, wallabies, etc. So it's really cool sitting on the deck and watching the wildlife come out as the sun goes down. All right, so day 1, you've arrived at your cabin, hopefully get a good night's sleep. And day 2, you can get up and you can leave whatever time you like, as long as it's sort of, I think, by like about mid-morning, because they've obviously got to clean the cabins and welcome the next lot of guests for the next day. It's a pretty relaxed day. It's 11 kilometres, which might sound as though that's a bit of a walk for people who aren't used to doing longer distances. But in reality, it's mostly flat through beautiful wooded forests and heathlands. There's a short climb up to Arthur's Peak, which gives some lovely views out over the coast, but it's not strenuous at all. It's a really nice, relaxed way to get into walking the track. The hut on night 2 is the location of the shower, but before you get too excited, it is a cold water bucket shower. It is a great experience. It's a bit of fun. I was lucky to be there in summer and it was a hot day, so I actually found it really refreshing to have a bucket shower. If it's the cooler months, you want to brace yourself, but you'll probably still do it anyway because you'll be keen knowing that's your only shower for the next couple of days. Day 3 is a really big one, but also really spectacular. Uh, it's 19 kilometres in total, but the good news is that you get to leave your pack in a shed while you do the 16-kilometre out and back to Cape Pila. It is fantastic this day. The coastal views are just stunning all the way along the track. When you get out there, there's a really fun challenge, jumping over the gap out to the blade. You've got to do it, still yourself and get a photo. Take your time, soak up the spectacular scenery. Today is really probably the most scenic day of the track. When you get back to Hut 2, you pick up your pack and then it's just a few short kilometres through the forest to Hut 3. It's flat almost the whole way in there. It's not much of a walk. And when you get to Hut 3, this is where you'll find yoga mats, and a really big, lovely deck to get on and stretch your legs out, because day 4 is a pretty big walk as well. And day 4 is really where most people will tell you to do some hills training for the Three Capes track, and I definitely suggest that. Get on a stair climber or something like that, because not long after leaving your hut after the 3rd night, so on the 4th morning, you start walking out and you hit Mount Fortescue. In terms of a climb on its own, it's probably not that big a deal, but when you're taking your pack and you're not used to that, it is a bit of a climb up Mount Fortescue. You just need to take it slow and steady because the track is pretty good. The good news is that most of your food's gone because it's day 4, so your pack is definitely lighter than when you started out. But you will need to take a full supply of water that day because it's quite exposed when you get out to that 3rd cape. If you take your time, it's not that bad, but there's quite a bit ahead of you. So you get to the top of that and think it's over. Well, no, a bit to go. You walk a few kilometres across the top, and again, you get to drop your pack in a designated area so you can tackle Cape Way pack free, and you will want to be able to drop your pack because this is, quite an adventure to get out to Cape Way. It is spectacular. It is more challenging than the 2 capes you've done previously. There are a lot of stone stairs up and down. I mean, a lot. You just need to take your time, enjoy your lunch when you get out on the Cape, because I think the walk back is probably harder than the walk out to the Cape. And from there, you go back, you pick up your pack, and the guidebook will say it's a breezy few kilometres down to Fortescue Bay. I don't agree. I actually thought it was a very hot day, the day that I did this, but I felt like this was the longest part of the walk. Because mentally you think, I've only got a few Ks. But remembering you've already done 11 kilometres, including some reasonable climbing in the morning, and it's not all downhill to Fortescue Bay. So I'd rather be honest with you and say, yes, it's a short walk into Fortescue Bay, but it feels longer because you just feel as though, when am I going to get there? But then when you see the bay, you're pretty close to finishing when you actually see the bay and start descending into it. It definitely feels worthwhile. It's such a beautiful horseshoe bay with just gorgeous blue water. It's take a moment to go, wow, look what I've done for the last 4 days. Now, I'm going to suggest you need to go for a swim here at Fortescue Bay. Yes, the water is freezing, even in the middle of summer, and you really need to get your willpower just to push through the cold, dive in if you could. I need to wade in, but it's so much part of the experience to go swimming in the Tasmanian sea, and the cold water is just such a tonic for sore and tired muscles, washing away the sweat. Like, it's a little bit of a celebration, so do go in. You don't have to have a swimsuit. A lot of people just jumped in with t-shirts, and I just wore a pair of bike shorts under my hiking pants and jumped in with those. And look, you don't need to rush to get back to Hobart either. Some people prefer to because they want to get back to their accommodation in Hobart and clean up, and maybe they're flying out that night. That's fine. There are 2 buses which you have to nominate at the start of the walk. If you can, spend the time and get the later bus back to Port Arthur, because there are hot showers at the campgrounds here at Fortescue Bay. And if you leave your towel, some toiletries, and maybe a clean t-shirt and underwear, you'll be grateful you did, because you'll be cleaned up by the time you get on the bus. Remember, you've got that 90 minutes or so bus trip back to Hobart if that's where you're going. You will stop on the way at Port Arthur. So sorry, you're getting the Tasmania Parks and Wildlife Service bus to Port Arthur and then the 90-minute trip back to Hobart. Because obviously getting to Port Arthur, you need to pick up your bag. If you left it, last chance to, you can grab some food at the Port Arthur cafeteria, but fairly quickly you'll be getting back on that bus to Hobart. Now, I did opt to stay the night in one of the local motels, and I thought that was great. Rather than getting back and doing 90 minutes on a bus, I could just wander over there, have a really long hot shower. I had my pack again, so I could do a change of clean clothes. I had a great dinner and a glass of wine in the restaurant, and then I headed out with a couple of people I met on the track, and we all did the ghost tour, which was great fun. I highly recommend at Port Arthur itself. The only issue with doing it this way is that you have to wait until the afternoon the next day to go back to Hobart. The public bus also goes at 6 a.m. in the morning, so you either have to get up at the crack of dawn to get on that, or you're waiting for the private bus tour to get back to Hobart. But that's okay, because there are other things to do around the Tasman Peninsula. You just need to get transport out to them. On the park's website, they provide a great packing list for you to follow as to what you need to take on the track. I'm going to add a few things from my own experience that might be helpful. The first is, and I will say this, but do take it seriously, pack for all weather conditions. I went in that Christmas to New Year period. We had rain on the first day and those choppy seas that I talked about. And it was cold. That first night was like really, really cold. I was throwing things on from my pack because I was cold in the cabin, although we discovered later that the louvers were open. That probably wouldn't have helped. But you have to be prepared that you might get wet and cold weather. But then on the last day, like I said, it was super hot, and and I got sunburned. So take it seriously about bringing things like sunscreen and a good hat, because the Tasmanian sun is pretty tough on your skin if you get a really hot day. Make sure you have dry bags and a good pack liner. So, even if it's a garbage bag, line your pack with that and put everything in there. You definitely want to protect your sleeping bag. One of our unlucky guests, their sleeping bag fell in the water because they didn't have a grip on their pack when they jumped out into that choppy sea, and crikey, that would be miserable. From memory, I think the ranger helped out with a blanket, but it's not the way to start your hike. So make sure you have a good dry bags and a pack liner. All I took for rain was a hooded poncho, and that was enough because you can throw it all over the back of, you can throw it with your pack under it as well. And we were lucky because it was fairly light rain. It's up to you how much of the sort of heavy gear you want to take, rain gear, checking the weather out before you go. Also, like I said, that first night was really cold. So even in the middle of summer, I ended up putting my beanie on when I was sleeping. And on the first day, because we'd got wet in the water, I actually put my gloves on as I started the walk up as well. You might want thermals for nighttime. If you don't have a super cold rated sleeping bag, Parks suggests a rating to -5 degrees. You might consider a thermal liner to help increase the warmth in your bag if you are going in that winter or even sort of autumn, spring temperatures. You're going to need a decent sleeping bag or a bag with a good liner in it. Also, you want to have, they do suggest this, but I can't emphasize this enough. You need a day pack. And obviously weight is important because you're carrying it for 4 days. So you can buy these like pocket-sized ones. and it's all you need. Pop it open because you're just literally taking your lunch and your lunch and water for the day, maybe a rain jacket. A couple of people did get caught out because they didn't bring things like rain jackets or beanies or hats or whatever, or sunscreen, and then of course it was the weather went against them. But you're not carrying anything heavy duty in there, so those pocket sized ones will do the job. Hiking poles, honestly, they weren't really needed for most of the track. In fact, they were a hindrance on the boardwalks because the boardwalks have this sort of chicken wire covering over them, so the poles would get stuck in that. But if you have a lightweight fold-up set, the hills on day 3 and 4, it would have been helpful, or it was helpful. I did take hiking poles to have those, particularly on day 4, getting up. There's quite sort of big stone steps to get up. I don't think you need special hiking boots. That this is so individual, obviously, but it's called a dry track, and unless it's been raining a lot, you might get the odd puddle. But a dry track means well graded, well maintained, no water crossings, and so trail shoes are obviously going to be the most comfortable option, particularly if you're not used to walking long distances. So that would be what I would opt for, because you're unlikely to get blisters. Just remember that advice to go up one size and a wide toe box on the shoe. They do mention a torch or a headlamp. You do need this at night. It's pretty dark around the cabins if you need to get up and go to the toilet. One thing that I had a little bit of envy about was that I didn't have toe socks at the time that I did this walk, and watching people walk around at night with their toe socks and thongs because it was a little bit cool. Yes, definitely had envy about that because thongs is probably the only other thing you're going to carry, maybe Crocs as a second pair of shoes on this trail. Uh, Look, my cabin mates who I shared with washed their underwear and t-shirts every night. They only carried one set, they wore the same set every day. You absolutely can do this because there's an area to wash. And there's an area to hang it on the balcony to dry. I think only one day they had to wear them slightly damp. So you don't need to carry a huge amount of clothes with you. You really can get away, especially if you get something like merino or natural fibre where it's not going to smell as much. Like I said, noise is a problem in the cabins. You'll need earplugs, good earplugs, and maybe an eye mask. The lights do go off at night, but there's one outside that stays on. I wouldn't bring anything but the barest minimum of toiletries, given there aren't really any showering facilities, and a little travel toothbrush and toothpaste. A travel soap is probably really all you'll need until you get back to Port Arthur. Don't forget rubbish bags. It's on the list, but I want to really highlight to you because they don't really emphasize this enough. You need to take all your food rubbish out with you. You've got to carry it while you're on the track, but also at night when you've made your dinner. There are no rubbish bins. You've got to carry that food packaging out. And this is also a really important consideration of what food and water to bring. For example, you don't want to have glass or tins or anything like that. And lastly, just have some basic first aid. The rangers can't administer pain medication unless it's really serious, but you also just probably want to have something while you're on the track. There apparently is one venomous snake in the area, and I did see it, but it scuttled away at 100 miles an hour over the boardwalk or under the boardwalk as we approached. And the good news is that you're on a boardwalk for a lot of the track, which means that you're sort of above the forested areas, but you just want some of that basic first aid because in between cabins, and you might have like that 11, 14, 19 k's, you want something basic if you fall over or whatever it may be, you get dehydrated and you want some hydrolytes, etc. The last aspect I'm going to tackle is food and drink. Firstly, you have to carry 2 litres of water a day, and even though it's Tasmania, you really will need it. I like to use a bladder. Other people will take kind of those 1 litre water bottles in each side of their packs. Just remembering though, the days that you only take the little pack, you've got to be able to carry them, and it won't work as well if you don't have side pockets on those. This is 1 day's worth, so you need at least 2 litres for every day, plus what you want to drink at night. You can fill up and drink the rainwater at the cabins every day. It's up to you whether you treat it with a filter or you boil it. If you boil it, obviously you're going to have to do it the night before so that it's cool when you start off the next morning. You're probably going to want 2 containers either way, even if it's just sort of a cup or a lightweight bottle for that boiled water, rather than putting it straight into your bladder. The one thing I did enjoy, and I was glad that I took it in, friends told me I took some Pinot Noir in a flexible wine sack that I got off, Amazon or something like that. It is a bit of extra weight. It was drunk by the first 2 nights. Because you're sitting around socialising, it was great to be able to pour a glass of wine, and a few other people did the same thing. So that's up to you. You obviously don't want to carry bottles in or anything like that. There's no fridges, so you can't keep them cold, which is why I went for a red rather than a white. I don't think anything beats dehydrated meals for this type of trip. And the reason being is because you're basically cooking and preparing them in the packet, and then you can eat straight out of the packet. So no washing up. You've got to carry that packaging out anyway. If you do that, you want a really long spork or spoon or fork, whatever you choose. You just want a long-handled one if you're eating out of a dehydrated meal package. There were quite a few people on my trip cooking full-on meals, particularly on the first night. It's only that short walk to carry it in, and there's a barbecue at the first hut. The first night we were there, it was sort of rainy and windy, so not such a great idea because the barbecue's on the deck. But yeah, whatever you decide to take for your main meals, just remembering again that after that first night that it needs to be non-perishable. One option is to buy prepared meals. There's a number of companies in Tassie that offer this service, and generally they'll deliver them to your Hobart hotel. So you order them and then they'll drop them off. So when you get to the hotel, and the reason I mention this is because if this is what you're thinking of doing, and quite a lot of people on my trip did this, you need to have them delivered somewhere. So if you're thinking, I'll fly in, I'll jump on the coach, they generally don't deliver to Port Arthur. So you need somewhere for them to be delivered to if that's an option for you. Apart from dehydrated meals, I'll give you some ideas of some of the other things I took for the meals, and some of these are on the packing list, but breakfast, most everyone did porridge sachets. Something I took that was extra to this though is I took 3 UHT, like little small cartons of milk. I'd put most of it in my porridge, so I wasn't just mixing it in with water. And then I would have a cup of tea or two to get me by in the morning because I don't like black tea. So that's one thing you could think about taking. Snacks, what I found worked really well is those little Baby Bell or Laughing Cow cheeses, cherry tomatoes and baby carrots. They lasted the whole trip. And it was great just to have some fresh fruit and veggies on the way out. Salami sticks. If you're getting crackers, think of the really hard crackers, like a Vita Wheat type cracker, because they will get crushed in your pack. Tuna and salmon, see if you can get it in the foil pouches rather than the tins. Obviously nuts, you might want to pack it down to small sizes, muesli bars, protein balls. I took a tube of Vegemite, which was great for the morning because I took some wraps as well. Just some ideas for snacks there. I also took instant soups and hot chocolate sachets because when you came in the afternoon, it was great just to have something like that to eat straight away if you'd had a hard day of walking. And then you've almost got a 3-course meal because you have a soup, then you have your dehydrated meal, then you have a hot chocolate. And some people were taking those little instant pudding type desserts too, which I thought looked really good. People were raving about that. And obviously a bit of chocolate, but you're going to have to worry about it melting. The main thing I'd stress is, as I said, you need to be light on packaging. Even plastic containers can get bulky, so you're probably better off with those small Ziploc bags because they can also double up for putting all your rubbish and leftovers in. And you really want to Ziploc them up well because you don't want all that rubbish to smell in your pack. In fact, you might think about putting the rubbish in the top compartment of your pack, for example. And the last thing I thought I'd mention is your Three Capes track pass can give you access to some other parks in Tasmania. So definitely check that out, depending if you're intending to stay longer, and find out which other ones you can visit without buying another Parks and Wildlife ticket. I loved the Three Capes track. I reckon it's one for people of all ages. In the group behind us, there was a three-generational family, and the parents were in their 70s. I think it's, like I said, good for beginners who've done a bit of training and want to try multi-day hikes. People of all fitness levels, we had some people who just took it really slowly and had frequent stops along the way. So I think it's a great introduction to multi-day hiking, sensational landscape to walk through. And if you're not hooked by the end of this trip, something went wrong on doing more of it and exploring more of Tasmania. So enjoy, and until next time, happy hiking.